Ciao, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Calcio Culture. On today's episode, we are kicking off our 2025-2026 season previews, and we're talking about runners-up Inter Milan. This is going to be the first one in the series where we go through kind of the top teams in the league, give you a breakdown of what you can expect from this season, set what their goals are, and what we would define as a successful season. But before we get into that, we do have to give somebody a special shout-out, so I'm going to hand it off to Logs for that.
Ciao, paisans. Good to be back. I'm a little under the weather, so if I do cough in your face, I do apologize. But huge shout out to one in particular paisan this week at Alex-C3K5I, the boy on YouTube, came out showing love. He's the perfect example of why the three of us do exactly what we do with Calcio Culture to grow the game. Alex shared with us an incredible article that he wrote based on some data analytics that he's been doing as a part of his side job, looking at XG per shot, goals per shot, seeing who's the most efficient finishers in the league, seeing who gives up the most opportunities in the league. And may I say, the results of the data were apparent for those of you who have been watching all season. The likes of Colomboani, the likes of Lorenzo Luca, great finishers out there. And then the other side of it, you have obviously Dusan Vlahovic. Unfortunately, Nico Paz is also in the bottom of the table in terms of goals per shot and XG per shot. But again, Alex-C3KAI, you the man, paisans, grow the game, share with your friends, write articles about it, do some data analytics, put some math together, 2 + 2 = 4. We'd love to hear about it. This is what it's all about going into season number 2 here. Keep it going.
I'd also say just grow the channel. Thank you for the comment. Thank you for the like. Continue to like, comment, subscribe. And if you do want us to talk about a specific topic, comment on it. Comment on what your thoughts are on the conversations we've had. Very appreciative to Alex. And if you did listen to this podcast for the entire season, the results that he got were pretty spot on with what we have been saying all year, especially Vlahovic being bad at the game of soccer and me saying Colomboani is the best player on the pitch for Juventus every time he steps out there. So kind of says that we kind of know what we're talking about here, boys.
A little bit.
We might. We're setting ourselves up for failure, though, because we're about to talk about Inter Milan, what we can expect from them. But yeah, shout out Alex. You should post that somewhere also. You kind of sent it to us privately, but that was a really good article, so you should just get it out there somewhere.
Sure.
But let's get into it. Inter Milan, we'll start with what happened last year. Kind of a mixed bag, kind of a good season, kind of a bad season. Like we said, runners-up in the Serie A, Champions League runner-up, although that game went very poorly against PSG in the Champions League final. Coppa Italia semifinalists, where they got played off the pitch in the second leg by AC Milan. And then Supercoppa in Saudi Arabia, the game was held. Lost to AC Milan again in the final. So kind of second place across the board. What we talked about at the end of last season was kind of what's going on with the club. Where are they? We talked about where are they with Simone Inzaghi, who was their manager last year. He made the decision for them. He has gone to Saudi Arabia. So they have one of the best managers in the world, one of the most touted managers in the world. He has left the club. Some other important things that happened this summer. Joaquin Correa went out. Marko Arnautovic, like the rotator strikers last year, not the most important guys, but guys that did come up with some big goals, logged some big minutes last year. So in total, they've raised $25 million from sales. Going into what has happened in terms of who they've brought in, the first one, manager, is Cristian Chivu, who we're going to talk about in just a second, because that brings a lot of things with that appointment. They've also signed Bonny from Parma for 23 million euros, Luis Enrique from Marseille for 23 million euros, Peter Sucic for 14 million euros from the Croatian league, I believe that one was. And then they took Zalewski from Roma for 6.3 million euros in total. 66 million spent. And that kind of sets the stage for our immediate discussion here, guys, because I think it's been a mixed bag of a summer. I think on the Chivu appointment, there's some question marks. And then also some question marks are, have they made the right moves so far? And the other thing is there is one kind of big pending move that I think we need to talk about as well. But with those moves, where are we at with Inter going into this season?
Well, when you look back at the last season, if you were to ask an Inter fan if it was a success or not, they would say absolutely not. If you were to ask a Milan fan, it was an incredible season. Absolutely love to see it.
Don't turn this into
across the board. PSG absolutely giving it to them every which way. Great season from my perspective. But from what's happened this summer, they have not gotten even a little bit better. I think the only thing that they've solved from an issue perspective last season, and for whatever reason, and as I'm thinking back on it, we talked a lot about the depth of Inter last season. I don't think they were that deep when you go back and you look at the roster and you look at the players that they had and that they actually utilized. What they've solved this season in the summer is that they've addressed that depth problem. They now have a viable third striker in Boney coming in behind Thuram and behind Lautaro. They have Luis Enrique, who is a little bit of a versatile player and can certainly play in the wide spaces, which I think definitely helps them from an offensive perspective. Peter Sucic, I think, is going to be the best signing of the summer for them by far.
I agree.
He's finally a player that can fill in behind Hakan, where Aslani would come in and just be a completely different type of midfielder, not even remotely as effective as Hakan. I think Peter Sucic can finally fill in there and be a guy that will be able to hold that back line, be able to facilitate, and be a little bit more of a destroyer from a defensive perspective in front of that back three. And then finally bring in Zalewski, who I think for them was a complete Swiss Army knife, which was a surprise to me at least, is going to be a great addition as a full-time player, getting a full season under his belt with a new team. But from the coaching standpoint and the outlook standpoint, this team is in a little bit of a dumpster fire from my perspective. Again, they have a great, talented front starting 11, a little bit old in that back line, like we've talked about all last season. So I'm wondering to see if they do go out and they do solve that in the next couple of weeks before the season or even before the transfer window ends. But this Inter squad is not the same squad with the same expectations from a regular fan's perspective going into the 2025-2026 Serie A season, in my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely, I don't think you can look at them as the clear-cut favorite going into this coming campaign, just based off of who had Inzaghi leaving. But to your point, Logs, in terms of the depth that they've added, I think they've added it in the wrong positions. Like Taremi, where he didn't have a great season last year, they still had a backup striker in him. Luis Enrique plays left wing back. They have DeMarco and Carlos Augusto, who plays there as well. The only area where I think, and now Zalewski can kind of play both on the left and the right. So they're just bolstering their best positions almost. To me, they needed to address their back line for sure. And Acerbi's extremely old. Pavard is a streaky player. Bissek, we saw his potential last year, but we also saw him give up 15 handballs and a lot of bad tackles to cost them games. So I think they needed to address other positions before they went out and addressed the ones that they did. The one area that I think was smart of them addressing that you mentioned is Sucic. They needed to address that area. They did. That's good. So now they can actually possess the ball and pass the ball without Hakan and stop playing Zalewski kind of not in his correct position. But yeah, for me, it was kind of center back and goalie. I know that last summer they did sign a goalie, but they didn't really play him that much. He's still not proven. I would have Summer just another year older, and we saw Summer have a lot. When he was good, he was amazing, like that Barcelona game, but we saw him make a lot of mistakes and
especially in the Serie A. He lost them some games in the league. If it goes the other way, they win the league.
Correct. That's my point. And we also saw them have a ton of mental lapses, whether that be defensively or as a team. They had mental lapses time and time again in the 80th minute plus. So I think they bolstered the wrong areas. And then I also think the disappointment in Chivu is you don't know what you're going to get with this guy. He's never managed 3 competitions. He's never managed for a club nearly as big as Inter. He's never managed personalities as the ones that you have when it comes to guys on Inter. He's never managed a team with expectations like Inter has. They are in win now, Champions League, Serie A or bust. And we don't know what he's going to do. We saw Juventus appoint somebody last season who never managed 3 competitions and he crashed out. And he at least had the experience of a player playing in those competitions. So question marks all over the pitch for me. Or not the pitch, question marks all over these transfer moves and appointments for Inter. And then you have the whole discussion of the Chivu's formation and how that's going to look.
Yeah, Matson, the Chivu point is really where I think we need to start the discussion about what we can expect from this team this year, because I think the transfers kind of set up what the team might start to look like, and we'll kind of tie that into the squad in a little bit. But Chivu was really the big news of the summer, regardless of who they signed. Little background on him. He got appointed by Parma in, I think it was February, and that was his first senior managerial experience. So he basically got 4 months of first team manager football. They were okay. I mean, they didn't get relegated, didn't really see anything for me that said this guy is ready to take the next step. I think a lot of people were probably in that same boat. What did go into this decision was that Inter kind of were forced into making a choice at manager. And kind of the whole discussion around Inzaghi, if you do fire him, who do you replace him with? Nobody was really out there. Chivu is a former player, so I think that did also feed into it and kind of a safe appointment in a way. He was in the league, he played for the club, had success with the club. So I think it was a safe appointment for them. But in terms of how they play, Mots, what have you seen in the preseason, kind of what you expect this formation to look like? Because that's really going to drive the conversation of who's going to play. What is our 11?
Yeah, there's going to be, or it looks to be based on the Club World Cup games and just Twitter news that Chivu's looking to bring in a slight change in formation from a 3-5-2 to a 3-4-2-1. So it's going to be, the Inter's going to look slightly different from last year to this year in terms of Thuram will be playing behind Lautaro, and they'll be losing a midfielder, which to me is going to be huge because Inter have a lot of very talented midfielders, and we saw what they looked like without Hakan on the pitch. And so losing that third midfielder, I think, is going to be maybe a struggle early on for them. We'll have to wait and see. But that's basically what he's going to be switching the formation to. It's going to go from a 3-5-2 under Inzaghi to a 3-4-2-1 under for this coming season.
Yeah, and kind of from a principles of play perspective, what we can expect from Chivu, and this is what we did see at Parma, quick counterattacking and then high pressing. And I think in a way, the best Inter on Inzaghi was that counterattacking Inter Milan team. I think the big difference, and Mats, you really pointed this out, what set Inter apart under Inzaghi and what made people say he could be one of the best coaches in the world is that fluidity. We saw the left center back or the right center back at striker sometimes. Sometimes it was a Cherby at striker. We saw that in the Champions League. Players were allowed to go wherever they need to go on the field. And I have question marks if Chivu's going to allow that. And even in that, can you even afford to do that playing with the two-man midfield? I would say no. Because if you lose a midfielder, all of a sudden there's one guy in the middle of the field. And if your center back's out of position, you're dead. So a lot of question marks for me on this one. I think not very high ceiling and I think very low floor. But we're going to see what he does this year because, again, it's going to be a 3-4-2-1 most likely. But in my mind, he's going to have to change things up throughout the year. I don't see this going well initially. And this could be big setbacks from the beginning of the season. We could have a Roma situation where 5 games in, maybe they don't have any wins. That wouldn't be all that surprising to me, especially with how they started last year, which was best team in the league and really were struggling to get wins. They had a lot of draws against lesser teams. So I don't have a ton of confidence with this appointment. What about you, Lokes?
No, disappointment to me. Actually, the confidence that I have in this is that I do think that this was very intentional by Inter in that Chivu was the fall guy. No one in the world was going to come into this Inter squad and be able to follow up what Inzaghi has done over the last some odd years. And so they're thinking, okay, who can we bring in that the fans are going to respect at least the decision to bring him in? Okay, past player. Who's coaching in Serie A right now? Past player. Chivu. Let's bring in Chivu. He's going to absolutely be a disaster. There's no way this is going to work out. Let him be the fall guy. Let him be a little bit of a buffer for whoever the real long-term guy is going to be. And the reason I also think that I'm so convicted in this is because look at what this transfer window has brought in. When in the entire last 6 seasons of Inter have you seen a window where Inter brings in 2 21-year-olds and 2 23-year-olds? When have they ever looked to bring in the younger generation and looked to develop them? We talked about it at length. That was not Inzaghi's strength. So they go out, they bring in the next gen, they bring in the next fleet of players to come through this squad, and they use a buffer guy, a fall guy like Chivu to set up the next guy to have zero expectations, zero pressure to start building out whatever he can do in a season and a half, call it 18 months thereafter, with a new generation of players at Inter.
I have a lot that I disagree with what you just said. I don't disagree with him being the fall guy. The first thing I disagree with is who can come in and replicate what Inzaghi did. But in a style of play aspect, okay, I agree there. In a results aspect, I don't agree there. They underachieved, and I think Vos has been kind of saying that for the last 2 or 3 years now, that they have underachieved with Inzaghi. So in terms of a result, who can come in, a lot of people can do what Inzaghi did with this team. Then in terms of a development, he took Thuram and made Thuram an $80 million player who came in on a free. Bastoni, you didn't know who Bastoni, what he made Bastoni one of the best center backs in the world.
Bastoni came in when he was like 19. Yeah, I agree.
And Dumfries as well came in cheap. Hakimi might have been under Conte, but Inzaghi's been known for give me free players that you don't spend money on, and I'll make them very good players. Then the reason why they're bringing in younger players is because they're the oldest team in the league by like 4 years. They are so old. So they understand that they need to get younger in some positions. So I think that actually is a good part of what they did in the summer is they did get a little bit younger. But it's like Inzaghi was very good at developing players. I don't think Chivu will get the style of play, but from a results standpoint, I think he can kind of replicate what Inzaghi did. But if he doesn't, I agree. He can definitely be a fall guy, the scapegoat. This is why we aren't doing good. He doesn't know what he's doing. And then they can hit the panic button, figure it out in December, January, and then try to figure out what they could do then if that happens.
The other thing that's really working against him that I think is worth mentioning is he's got to compete in 3 competitions at least. And he's coming from Parma where the only objective was to not be relegated. Now you're expected to get deep runs in the Champions League. You're expected a deep run in the Coppa Italia. And realistically, you're expected to win the league. So, I mean, he's never managed that. What I think will work in his favor, and maybe they do want to go this route, he's probably more apt to play younger players than Inzaghi was. We talked about that with Frattesi a lot last year. Like, where's Frattesi? Where's Frattesi? Where's Frattesi? At Parma, he had younger players, so he probably has more trust in them than Inzaghi did have. And maybe he has that vision, and maybe of the more of the board being able to control him, be like, hey, you have to develop some players. So if there was a positive for him, that's what I would say it was.
Yeah. And I know we're about to get into the formation and who we think is going to play, but just off the Frattesi point, him changing to a 2-man midfield, Barella is a midfielder every single time, and they're stacked in the midfield. So how many games can he play all these guys and balance it if he does end up going with the 3-4-2-1, which let's get into that formation line by line now, but it's going to be questions every time he runs out of formation or a player's out there, I think.
Definitely. So let's get into it. I think this is probably the best way of previewing the team. We're going to go line by line, goalkeeper, defense, midfield, forwards. We gave you guys the transfers that kind of happened just to set the scene because I think that's important for the discussion. But to start with goalkeepers, Mott's made a really good point on this one, so I'll let him chime in. Then Logan, I know you had a point here too, so you can just follow up.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 goalies, it hasn't changed from last season. It's Sommer and Martínez. Last season, Sommer did start most of the games. As I mentioned, he came up huge in a lot of games, specifically in the Champions League. But as Vo said, in the Serie A, he did blow a lot of them. They did not give Martínez a lot of burn last year at all to see what he has. I know he showed a lot of promise when he came in the season he was on Genoa from when he came last summer. But to me, you needed to use him more. So I don't know what you're going to get from him in terms of this season. So that's a little bit of a gamble. And I think that you know what you're going to get from Sommer, and it's going to be very sporadic or very not consistent football and bad on the ball. So how much playing out of the back does Chivu want to do is going to play a factor in Sommer playing, I think.
I agree with that, Mats. If they want to play out of the back, they got to play Sommer, and I don't think you can take anything away from
No, I
what
think
Jan did
Sommer's
too.
no, I
Sommer's
think we
bad on the
yeah, I
ball.
think we both agree he's not great on the ball.
I mean, I think he's okay, but he definitely, there's no way you watch the Champions League final game and think he's good on the ball. I agree with that, but that press was insane. I think the thing with the goalies here is you can't take away what Sommer did over his career, one, but number two, and most certainly 2 seasons ago in his first season in Serie A, he was absolutely stupendous. Last season, definitely gave up a lot of games for Inter here. And I will say, when Martínez played, I told you guys I'm playing hurt. When he showed up in Serie A, he played really well. He's a great shot stopper. So I'm not surprised to see them not go after a new goalie this season, especially given the lack of depth that they had elsewhere.
Day one, who's your guy? For me, you got to turn the page on Jan Sommer. I don't think it's worth it in terms of like the risk reward, because I think to your point, Lugs, like kind of like the floor on Josep Martinez is like he was good. He's been good in the league. Like he's not going to be terrible, but on Jan Sommer, it's like what more value are we eking out of him versus taking away the opportunity from the younger guy? So for me, it would be Josep Martinez day one. I think that's what Chivu is going to do as well. What do you guys think?
No, I think that's the right call. I'd rather get off the sinking ship before it sinks than ride it to the sea bottom. And given the trajectory that Sommer's been on, I guess in the last 12 months, you definitely want to get out earlier rather than later. And to be honest, this guy's old. He's 34 years old. He's probably happy to ride the pine, get his contract, and watch the other guy take the lead here. So
I thought
happy
Sommer
how-
was older than that.
36. Apologies.
36, yeah.
Still
I
a
think
bag.
I think I would agree that the correct play is to bench Sommer, but I think because he has the experience and Chivu's a new manager, he's going to pick Sommer to start.
I think that's actually a good take. It's a safer play for him. Like, why would my first crazy managerial thing be bench our experience? That's fair. That's fair. But with that, let's move on to the next line. Back three. So we're going to talk about the 3 center backs for this one. Mott said earlier, question marks around who is going to be playing, question marks around do they need to bring in somebody else? To bring you guys through the group of defenders, we have Bastoni, Bissek, Pavard, De Vrij, Cherby, and we can kind of throw Darmian in there at times, kind of question mark.
Carlos Augusto kind of tucks in sometimes,
Yeah,
occasionally too.
But we'll see what Chivu, if he's willing to do that kind of thing. Let's talk about who is going to start, why they're going to start. Let's just go left center back, center back, right center back. Left center back, is there any question that it's Bastoni? Is it anybody else? No.
No.
Alessandro
I think
Bastoni
that's the
is
I
like
think that's the only area where there's no question. The other two, I think there are large question marks.
Yeah, and the reason behind that is Alessandro Bastoni has very quickly become maybe the best center back in the world in the last 12 months. I think if there is a discussion about it, it's where does he fall in the top 5? Like, and he very well could be the number 1. So if you haven't watched him before, it's like a guy that you should tune in to actually watch. He's extremely progressive. You're going to see him all over the field, even though he's a center back. So it's a guy to have on your radar whenever you're watching an Inter Milan game if you haven't seen him. But getting into the other 2 areas then. Center back, and right center back. In the past with this Inter Milan team, we've seen, particularly with Inzaghi and Antonio Conte at times, use a right center back who is capable of carrying the ball forward. Now we're at a place where maybe we're not going to see that. And a lot of the season last year, it was Benjamin Pavard and Bissek as their right center back. Going into this season, how do you think Chivu's looking at this? Because for me, day one, your 3 best center backs are Bastoni, Bissek in the middle, Pavard off the right. And we never saw that at any point last year. And the center back last year was De Vrij or a Cherby mainly. And it was a Cherby when he was healthy for 90% of the season. I wouldn't do that this year. I would be looking to make the next move. And I think the product that we've seen from Bissek, and for people that haven't seen him, he is gigantic. He's athletic. He is a little chaotic on the ball, which is why I would put him in the middle of the 3. Just kind of like a big titan, going to cover some ground. And then you have Benjamin Pavard, who has historically been a right back, a right wing back, extremely good on the ball, pocketed some really good players last year, including Rafael Leao. So that's why I would go down that route, but curious to see what you guys are thinking.
The problem you have with Bissek in the middle is that he has to be on the ball a lot, and he's not very, you just said he's not very good on the ball. What I will say is when you do watch him, and it's almost a surprise, is that he does like to get forward when he does get the ball, which is why he's good on that right center back role. You never really expect it, but he does like to streak forward. But in my mind, it's like, yes, you're right. The best three are Bastoni, Bissick, Pavard. If you put Pavard and you put Bissick together, like that's the perfect center back in this model. But Pavard's a little bit undersized to be playing the center, and Bissick's a little bit not too chaotic on the ball, like you said. So it's really tough, and that's exactly why Cherby and DeVry still have minutes in this line, right? Because they're big, sturdy guys. Obviously, the experience comes in handy as well, but they're really good when they're on the ball. I would say, especially DeVry. But if Bissick can at least be serviceable and not freak out when he gets the ball when they're cycling around, and maybe it's Hakan's job to drop in and just be that center back from a distribution perspective, like that could solve the problem. But then if you're playing a 2-man midfield, you can't just take Hakan out of the midfield and drop in the back line. So that's where this formation comes into an issue, and that's why they really need to find another center back. And really, from a window perspective, they should be searching far and wide. And I think there's a very, I think, obvious name here in Leone that they should be buying with a left-footed left center back, because what that allows you to do is put Bastoni in the middle, where he's unbelievable on the ball. And what I think his biggest progression last year was his long-range passing. We all know that he was phenomenal driving the ball forward in a Calafiori type style, which it's hard to say who started it, whether it was Calafiori or Bastoni, but Bastoni really picked up a really unbelievable range of passing. And to your point, Vos, and for those that really haven't watched Serie A, I'm just getting into it now. If Bastoni was playing in the Prem, he would be up there with Van Dijk and with Saliba. It'd be no question he'd be right next to them, if not better. So he's come a long way, and I think that if Inter are going to fix this back line, they have that right side really figured out. If they can shift Bastoni to the middle and bring in another left-footed left center back, I think that really solves their backline issue, because then if you do need to bring in some depth, you just push Bastoni out to the left and you can play a Cherby and DeVry in the middle when you need to, but it shouldn't be your first choice.
Quick correction there. Leone is right-footed, so that is important.
All right, so don't bring Leone in because he's not left-footed.
But just Mats, I'll kick it to you in a second. When we talk about left-footed left center back in a back three, the reason you want a left-footed left-sided center back is it just creates a different passing angle. If you have a right-footed center back on the left side of the field, basically his dominant foot kicks the ball like through the center of the field when he's progressing play. When you have a left-footed guy, you're basically going around more players by kicking it to the outside naturally. And back to you, Mats.
I agree a lot with what both of you guys said. I don't want to reiterate both of your points. They're missing, and I said it earlier on, they're missing a center back. They need to buy another one. You got to move on from a Cherby. DeVry, I think, makes where he's good on the ball. He's easy to run past. He's not very mobile. And putting that in the center back is tough. So you have very good right center backs in Bissick and Pavard. You have the best center back in the league, maybe the world, in Bastoni, but you're missing one. And to Logs' point, it's go get one more guy, move Bastoni to the middle, and then you can use a Cherby and DeVry when you need to in rotational games. But they need another guy. And in terms of whom I would play Bastoni, Bissick, and Pavard, like you said, Bose.
So my question for you guys, because you both actually said it, you think the best move is to move Bastoni to the center back? Because I pretty adamantly disagree with that. We're going to bring in another player.
It depends on who they bring in, right? Like if you bring in Leone, then maybe he could play a center back spot with Bastoni at left center back. Bastoni does so well getting further up the pitch, but I think to Logs' point, playing and it happened against Juventus, watching them under Tudor, playing the 2-man midfield. If you drop the midfielder closer to the center backs, that one midfielder that you left gets overran. Right, it happened time and time again on Juventus when Locatelli would drop in. It would be Thuram against 3 guys, and there's no chance there. So if Hakan is dropping in because they have a Cherby out there, then there's nobody else in the midfield unless Bastoni does go up.
Yeah, that would be my point. Like my counterpoint would be Bastoni's best trait is like his ability to contribute offensively, either on the ball or with his movement. So I just feel like you'd be limiting him. Like best parts about him are that.
So I don't think you're limiting him because he did that for Italy, and we saw how good he still was both on the ball, making passes, and defending. Like he was player of the match for most of the games for Italy at the center back role, and he's still going to get forward. And I think he would just be getting forward in a different way, or like adding to the attack in a different way than maybe scoring goals and crossing.
Yeah, that's
whereas
true.
this would be playing long balls like a Bonucci would do.
Maybe like that libero kind of role. Like, who's to say he can't join the midfield as the third midfielder and then kind of
Exactly.
vacate space
Right.
that way? Yeah, that's true. I agree with you
So
guys. I think they need another center back for sure. They don't have
100%.
like another guy. So I think that's what we were alluding to with that transfer kind of section before. But that wraps up the center back area. Wing back area, a little bit less dramatic, I would say. Their kind of group is Denzel Dumfries is presumably their number one right wing back. I don't think there's any discussion about that. Number one left wing back is presumably Federico DiMarco, and then kind of backups behind them. Carlos Augusto off the left side. Luis Enrique, who's a new signing from Marseille, can presumably play both sides. And then Nicolò Zalewski also can play kind of both sides, also in the midfield. With the midfield group they have, I see him more being a wingback just because that group is so clogged. But in this, are there really any question marks here for you guys? Or is it, if the number one guy is healthy, he's going to play, particularly maybe somebody just talk a little bit about Denzel Dumfries and what he brings, because we talked about how insane of a season he had last year.
I mean, again, they haven't lost a step here at wingback. I think DiMarco had a little bit of a step back last season, but that's only because his 2 seasons ago was just stupid good. But what they have here in their wingbacks is a player like DiMarco who can play the best peaches in all the game from the left side into anywhere in the box, pinpoint passing, high energy, a little bit undersized, but it doesn't matter. The guy has incredibly high soccer IQ and can get into the box when needed, scores phenomenal goals. I think when, we saw it with Tonali's unbelievable assist to him off the volley, that was, he's got absolute screamers in his back pocket. But then you go to the other side and you have Denzel Dumfries, who's an absolute favorite of mine from La Orange, Dutchman at heart, the Flying Dutchman. This guy has the biggest engine in all the league aside from maybe our boy up at Atlanta. What this guy brings to the right side of the pitch is unbelievable. Covers the entire, how many yards is a soccer pitch? 110 yards? It's really fucking far. Covers the entire pitch. But what he really brings is the best combination of defense and offense from that wingback position that we haven't seen in any other player, I think, in the world. And so certainly not taking any steps back from there. Nice to see that they bring in a little bit of a backup with Luis Enrique, and Carlos Augusto has been there already. And we've seen what kind of talents that he has. From my perspective, this only pushes Zalewski out of that position. And if they are going to go to that 3-4-2-1, and we'll touch on it in a second with Frattesi, that if they go to a 2-10 behind the striker, I could see Zalewski playing that second 10 with a Frattesi on the right and Lautaro or Thuram or Bonny up top.
That's a good shout. I think while I was looking at the names, a potential that we could see, and I think would make sense, is you can move Bastoni to the center back, and Carlos Augusto can play left center back.
That's true too.
And then you still have Zalewski and Luis Enrique and Darmian off as your potential backup wing backs when needed. We'll see if he goes that route, but there's some flexibility there. I still don't think that it is going to be the full solution. It can be a makeshift solution there, but that's a potential. And then just going back to the wingbacks really quick, I don't know how Dumfries was not bought for $25 million. He had a release clause the whole month of July. All you had to do was pay $25 million, and you got Denzel Dumfries. And if you play a wingback position, I don't know how you don't just spend the $25 million and get him, because he is an absolute beast in every sense of the word. If he can score any type of goal, header, bicycle kick, did it in the Champions League, power shot, finesse shot, can cross it, can defend, is great in the air. He is one of the best, if not the best, wingbacks in the world. And so I don't know how he wasn't bought.
Yeah, between DiMarco and Dumfries last year, 11 goals, 9 assists. Like, from your wingback position, you can't really ask more than that. My kind of
just
question,
in the league, right?
Just in the league. Yeah, this is just in Serie A. My kind of question around this is, so last year was like a 3-5-2 with a holding midfielder and 2 kind of 8 in the midfield. This year, if we're looking at more of like an advanced front 3, Do you maybe need to change this a little bit? Because we always talk about DeMarco. What is DeMarco's biggest weakness? His defensive game.
Defense.
Exposed on Italy, exposed in the league, exposed in the Champions League. And then Dumfries, on the other hand, his two best things are, yes, he's great at defense and covers a ton of ground, but he's also your right winger because he's able to get so far forward. And if you play that front three, if it is a front three, to your point, Lokes, it might be two strikers and a number 10 behind them. If you do a front three, if you have somebody that wants to drift out wide to the right, you're hindering Dumfries because he owns that space and is so lethal out there. So it is a little bit of a, what are we going to do with Chivu, especially with some of the new players they're linked to? I would be surprised if it's a natural front three, personally, just because DeMarco and Dumfries want to occupy the wide areas. And it might look more like that two strikers and a number 10. But I think there is something to think about because as good as DeMarco was offensively, he was so bad defensively so many times and kind of even got it masked because Bastoni was there to bail him out so many times.
And that's one reason why later on in the Champions League, we saw DeMarco coming off in the 50th minute for Carlos Augusto. Like, he was the first sub, not only because he does have some
fitness issues,
stamina and fitness issues, but just because his defense, he lacks defensively. So that is a good point.
Yeah, and the last thing I just want to talk about 1 second, really important guy to just be aware of, and we talked about him as maybe playing as left center back, is Carlos Augusto. We talked about him last year. We talked about him all season long. He is good enough to be a number 1 wingback on most teams in Serie A. So if you do watch some games and you see him come off the bench or he is starting games, just take note of him. He isn't just some random guy that's playing. He is a phenomenal player, and I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to force his way out of here at some point if he doesn't become the number 1, because he's definitely good enough to be the number 1 left back, left wing back, left center back, and a back three on other teams in the league. So just another point there.
But and to that point, I will just say, when you do watch, he does go a little bit understated because he's not as flashy in the offensive end, but his defensive skills are second to none on the wing, in the wingback spot here. And again, if he plays left center back, he's a little bit undersized, which is perfect for why he's a left wing back. High engine, great defensive skills, very low ceiling on the offense, but can still work the ball around, which is helpful. So do take notice. That's a great shout, Bose.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. We kind of know who the number 1s are, though, day one, and Dumfries and DeMarco. Going out to the midfield, this is a bigger discussion, especially when they go to back 2. When it was a back 3, or a midfield 2. When it was a midfield 3, it was a little bit more clear-cut, less competition because there was that extra spot. In a 2, ton of competition now. And going through the players that they do have, Hakan Çalhanoğlu, Frattesi, Peter Sucic, the new signing, Nicolò Barella, Zielinski, Aslani, who may be leaving along with Zielinski. There's a little bit of discussion there. Henrik Mkhitaryan, and then we talk about maybe Zalewski in this mix. I think less so, maybe looking at him further up the pitch. Interesting puzzle for Chivu, because if you play a midfield 2, you're kind of hamstrung in the types of players you need. And I say that because you need a very balanced 2, because it's their sole job to cover the whole field. When you have a third guy, you can kind of cover up some different areas. But when it's a 2, part of the thing with the 2 is you need guys with an engine. And when I say that, you need guys that can get up and down the field and can contribute offensively and defensively. So it kind of hamstrings you with who you can play. And this is a big puzzle for Chivu because he has a lot of different archetypes of players here. He can go a lot of different ways. Maybe he has a different lineup for every game. But how would you go about setting up this 2-man midfield? Presumably, that's what he does, we think.
I mean, there's one part of it that's easy for him, right? And it's Barella.
True.
And Barella can cover the whole pitch, has the engine. And so now it's just, who do you match next to Barella?
Can you just expand on that a little bit, Mats? Like, why is it Barella? Because, yes, for us that have been watching Serie A, watch Italy, Nicolò Barella is one of the best midfielders in the world, but why is he such a lock?
Yeah, Barella is one of the best midfielders in the world. It's kind of the same scenario with Bastoni. If he's in the Premier League, he's talked about as probably a top 5 player or a top 5 midfielder in the world. He can defend, he can pick a pass, he can score a goal, he can dribble by your man. He is never tired. He runs up and down the pitch. So there's nothing that he cannot do on the pitch. And he is a sure lock, whether it's on the national team, on Inter. He's a sure lock playing at the right center mid position. Whether it's a 2-man midfield, 4-man midfield, 3-man midfield, he's in. It's who you partner next to him. And typically, you would think that would be Hakan because of the level of play that Inter has, how it drops when Hakan is not on the pitch. However, being that it's a two-man midfield and you need legs, we know Hakan, whereas he can cover ground, he doesn't have a ton of legs in him. We have seen him drop into the center back role as Inzaghi does in the system, but he doesn't have great defending in him. So it's going to be, can Hakan be the perfect match to Barella, in my opinion, to see if it will work. The one thing I will say with the guys that you listed, and to Lowe's point earlier, I thought it was a very good point, is there are a lot of versatile players in this midfield group that can play behind the striker in the 10 role. So he can mix and match where he plays guys. Like we've seen Fortezzi play that spot position for Italy behind the striker as the 10 role. We think Zalewski can definitely do that. Zielinski can definitely do that, right? So he has a lot of versatility in this group, but I think the big question mark is, can Hakan be the engine next to Barella, or will it be a great complement? Because another part that you have to take into account is Hakan doesn't really cover that much ground or have great defensive abilities. The guy to the left of him is going to be DeMarco.
Yeah, true.
He covers ground, but doesn't have that much defensive capabilities as well. So you're looking at a pretty gaping hole or pretty bad defenders on the left side, and then you have Bastoni there, which can kind of clean up everybody. But that's another question mark there.
The way that this midfield is the way that the strengths of this midfield are, and presumably that this is the formation that they want to go with, it doesn't play into the second best midfielder's strengths in Hakan being able to kind of mosey around the field and pick his spots and facilitate. So I actually think that the way this works is you do go two-man midfield and you have Barella who has a tendency to stay more forward than stay back. I think we can all agree that he really wants to be on the offensive when he can, which then begs the question, okay, who's going to stay back and plug that hole with Hakan? And the way that I see this playing out, and to your point about Bastoni and getting him into the best positions for himself, this is not going to be a counterattacking team, or it shouldn't be. The way that this needs to be is a possession-strong team where they set up, they get up the field, and Bastoni is able to then settle in next to Hakan and create more of like a 2-4-3-2 when they're in possession in the front third, similar to how Man City used to play, where they would bring in John Stones or bring Rico Lewis in from the back line and set him next to either a Gundogan or a Kovacic and create that wall a little bit in front of the two center backs to hold that ball and to keep the ball in the front end of the pitch. And I think that that's where this could really work well, because you get Bastoni on the ball, you let Hakan still be the facilitator and not have to run around the pitch. The guy's a bag, so he's old, his legs aren't there, and you let him just kind of mosey around. You let Barella get forward, join that front line with 2 10s sitting behind a striker or 2 strikers with another 10. So you have Barella sit next to that 10, and then you have Dumfries and DeMarco running up and down the sides as they've done in the past anyways. So to me, that's where this team actually could pivot nicely, is into that possession-heavy team and play to the strengths that they already have. Don't get fancy with it, and don't get too strong-headed by trying to be that counterattacking team that you were years ago when you actually had young guys. That, to me, makes a perfect pairing, because otherwise you're playing Barella and Fortezzi, who both like to get up, even though they have a bunch of legs, but they both like to get forward. Sucic remains to be seen, but definitely a young guy, has the legs, and I think he likes to stay back. But again, in my mind, having Barella, who's for sure going to be that other midfielder, to me, he likes to get forward too much. He's never been known to be able to stay back and hold that spot. And you really need that in that two-man midfield to plug the gap there. And Vos, I mean, you may disagree, but to me, that's where I think Barella has a little bit of a drawback in this formation.
I don't know. I mean, Barella has played with a back three for years and years and years, and we've seen him drop into the back line seamlessly when he needs to, and kind of like that pivot. The other thing where I will push back on you guys a little bit is I was actually pretty impressed with Hakan's defensive prowess last year. I think it was more so fitness. He couldn't really get up to speed. So I do think that Hakan and Barella would work, and it would be more of like a pivot than we've seen in the past, where one goes forward, one kind of stays back. The other thing is, if you're still, and I don't think they're going to play a possession game. I think it's going to be counterattacking. I don't think they have the technical players to to go and hold the ball for long periods of time and break down a team and get 1v1s and beat people 1v1. So that's why I think it's going to remain counterattacking. I think where that benefits you in Hakan and Barella is that Barella is your explosive guy that's going to get forward. Hakan has played in counterattacking teams, and he has always been the guy that delivers that first long pass. And with that mix, you don't need him to run all that much if your primary stance is kind of solidity defensively. And kind of their first look when they do win possession back is, let's get the ball to Hakan so he can go deliver a ball. So I think that could work. When we look at the rest of the team as a whole, though, it's how does somebody else get into the team? Because Barella is, like we said, that right center mid. What is the path to that left center mid spot? Because for me, I think Frattesi is Barella's backup. I don't really see any time where they play together, really. And we had said, oh, Inzaghi, you should play the two of them together. Very different situation where you're playing with the number 6 behind them. So that's what I think there. I think it's Peter Sucic we have to really look at as maybe that next guy that is competing for that number 1 spot. And what he does have is more of like a box-to-box number 8 kind of guy and a little bit more defensive bite. But for me, day one, safe thing is Barella Hakan for me.
Yeah, I think that's safe. And to the Frattesi point, you're not going to see them a lot paired in the midfield too. You might see Frattesi play in front of Barella together on the pitch. But what I'd say to Vos about them not being the possession team and they want to be the counterattacking team, that's great in the Champions League when you're playing teams of your caliber. You're not about to let Parma have 60% possession and you're in a low block. Like, you got to go, you're Inter, you're going to possess the ball. And then when you have the ball, it can still play a factor that Hakan can fit because they have the ball. So it's not going to be a whole lot of running, but then they might be just a little bit more open to counterattacks. But to your point, if they're going to sit in a low block, it's great to have Hakan because he can ping any pass on the pitch. Same with Bastoni, same with Barella, same with DeMarco. And then if they're going to have the ball, Hakan can have it at his feet a lot and be the pacer that's needed. So they can play in both styles. It's just they will be more open to counterattacks with that midfield too, and being overran in the midfield against smaller or even better teams.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me in terms of the other four guys here, 3 or 4 guys, is that Hank's the biggest loser. Mkhitaryan's the biggest loser of this.
He should have been
window.
benched.
No,
that was on
Inzaghi. He was good. No,
And-
he was good last year. I'm not going to have
And I think that he performed. I do think that that's going to come to an end, and I don't think he sees the pitch that much at all this season, unless it's against the likes of
I agree.
Pisa or Cremonese. I mean, but in any case, I do think that Hank is the biggest loser here, and you will not be seeing a lot of minutes out of him.
Once again, though, this is another guy that can clearly play in the 10 spot. So they got 3 of these midfielders that we talked about, Zielinski, Mkhitaryan, Frattesi, can all play behind the one striker, and then they still have a decent amount of strikers that can also play in the 10 spot behind the striker and then as a striker as well.
Yeah,
So-
so let's go into that forward line then, because I think there's the right way of talking about it is presumably going to be a front 3. The question mark is, are they playing with 2 wingers and a striker, or are they going to play with 2 strikers and a number 10? And
Or
part
2
of
10s and a striker.
Yeah, 2 10s and a striker, kind of like winger still. But that group of strictly we're going to say these guys are their forwards. Marcus Thuram, Lautaro Martínez, their new signing Bonny from Parma, and Mehdi Taremi. That's kind of everybody that's left as in terms of number 1 strikers. The other guy they're linked to is Adamola Lookman from Atalanta, who's one of the best players in the league. Has played as like a number 9 on Atalanta in that 2 strikers and a number 10 behind them. Loves to drift out to the left wing is kind of what he does. Get 1v1 and is extremely effective there. This group screams to me 2 strikers and a number 10 behind them. Realistically, I don't really see a winger or really 10s being the best way to get your best players on the field. Because for me, Lautaro Martínez is your captain, has to be playing. Marcus Thuram has been one of the best strikers in the league for the last 2 years. He has to be playing. His best position is not really a winger. Lautaro's best position is not really a winger. And what Marcus Thuram does well is kind of run in behind and get into those wide channels to progress play, and then either get into the box to get on the end of a cross, or then get the ball back to Lautaro Martínez. And Lautaro Martínez is only going to play in the middle of the field. That is what he's best at. He's a lethal finisher, good at link-up play. So it's how do you add somebody around them is the way that I would be looking at this.
I just don't know if, while I do agree that Lautaro, Thuram should be out there, that's their most lethal front two, unless you are playing Frattesi or Mkhitaryan to come in and fill in that gap, this is going to be some ugly football by them because you're only playing long balls over the top on the counter. I don't know who comes in and is able to slot in to be able to progress play between the midfield two and those strikers. Even if they do bring in Lookman, that's going to be fully long ball because I don't know who's going to take the ball from just behind their half and progress it forward.
Barella.
Yeah, Barella maybe drives forward or Bastoni, but my point being is that Thuram is not a back to goal, come and get the ball and hold it for a second guy.
Lautaro.
I don't think Lautaro drops in that deep either, though.
Yeah, he does.
I think it will, yeah.
I think that's where he's got a slight advantage in playing kind of like a 2-1 is that like this is the only area on the pitch where there'll be a little bit of fluidness and it being only with Thuram and Lautaro. And it's because they've had such a great partnership already under Inzaghi where Thuram or Lautaro can drop deep and Thuram can run in behind, or Thuram can float out to the left or float out to the right and put in a cross. Where I think it gets a little tricky and maybe not so pretty is this Lookman situation. And if they bring Lookman in, because Lookman is not a unselfish player. Lookman is a selfish player. I want the ball at my feet. I want to take on my man. I want to beat my man. I want to shoot the ball. I want to score the ball. I want to score goals. He is not part of like Thuram and Lautaro where they want to score goals. For the most part, they are very unselfish. They do dirty work. They do what they have to do to score. Lookman, he does dirty work. He's going to get that ball and he's not going to want to pass it. And so whereas Thuram and Lautaro can drop in and interplay off each other, I don't know where Lookman can fit in here, which is why I don't necessarily love the link for Inter, but I do because I don't see it working. But then again, Lookman is a very good finisher. So I think like a 1-2 with a Lautaro up top, Thuram, and a Frattesi or a Zalewski or a Mkhitaryan, that is where it gets very good because then you can have a 10. You can have them running in behind and have Lautaro drop in. It can be very, very fluid and a lot of good chemistry and a lot of good link-up play.
Yeah, and with Thuram and Lautaro, they had 33 goal contributions last year. So, like, you have to play those guys. And I think just to talk a little bit about, like, archetype, what you get with them, Lautaro Martínez is, like, relatively undersized guy, but very good in the air, very technical player. And, like, you can ping a ball into him, he's going to bring it down, he's going to link up play. His number one trait, one-touch finishing. And then Marcus Thuram, 6'2", extremely fit, extremely fast, physical, presence. Also a good finisher in his own right, good in the air. So it's kind of like, how do we help them? And I think the worry about Lookman is that you don't really want to move Thuram to the right side of the field because he did all his damage running down that left side of the field. And Lookman doesn't really strike me as a guy that says, I'm going to go to the right side of the field to let Thuram
or in the middle.
Stay on the left. Yeah. And you're then kind of forced into playing him as a 10, which I don't really think is going to work out either. What I think they're maybe thinking is that we have Ange Bonny here, who is very much our Marcus Thuram understudy. Does all the same things that Thuram does, very similar build. Like they finally have a Thuram rotator that is going to play the same way. They might think Lookman is like their Lautaro too, which he is not. He's built similarly, but they are not alike whatsoever. And
he's also not about to be on the bench.
No, yeah,
and Inter's not about to pay the $50 million that Atalanta's requesting because they did just get a 43 or 46 plus $3 million bid rejected. It's still rumored that they're going to make the bid to get to 50 or 49, and he's basically forcing his way out now because he deleted everything and doesn't show up to practice anymore. But he's not about to be playing on the bench, and Inter's not going to spend $60 million for a guy that's just a rotational piece.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. I think the biggest thing here is, Vos, I agree with what you're saying about Thuram moving to the right, which is the biggest worry about Lookman. We've already seen what Thuram can do off the right, and it's not pretty. When he plays for France, because he goes to the right, because Mbappe's off the left, he's simply not that effective. And you would hate to see that be the same thing here, which is why it's a little confusing as to why Inter is pushing so hard for Lookman at this point. Because I do think that there are better options out there in terms of, maybe they do go get a 10 or they just get another guy that can play off the right. But talk a little bit more about what Boney did for Parma last season and why he was such a touted name and why Inter actually made this pretty quick business of getting him.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we were crying about all last year is when they rotated Lautaro out of the team or Thuram out of the team, they never had somebody that does similar things to Thuram. So you kind of needed to change the way you play if Thuram was ever out of the team because he stretches play and he makes those runs in behind that. Maybe he doesn't get the ball every time, but he's still stretching play. And Boney, coming from Parma, played it in a very counterattacking system, was a lone striker, and basically did all those things. He'll run into wide areas when he needs to. He can play back to basket and is actually pretty good in link-up play, which is
Very
probably
good.
better than Thuram at that. Has maybe some room to grow on actually being like that lethal finisher, but he puts in those hard miles. He makes those runs, and he's a physical specimen, just like Thuram. And he's somebody, when you watch the game, you're just going to see him because he's running everywhere. He's getting in positions to receive the ball, which is really good. So I would expect him to get big minutes this year, to be honest with you. This guy, he was linked to a lot of places. I'm a little bit surprised that he did end up going to Inter because he's going to be second. But I see him as a number 2 striker at the end of the day. He's not starting 11 for them, and it's really finding who's going to be that number 10 or that right winger, because Lookman is, I guess, a right winger. I would be very nervous about playing him under Lautaro and Thuram as like a 10. The way Lautaro plays, he can kind of be like a false 9 if you let Lookman and Thuram get ahead of them, but then you still run into the same situation of they want to play in the same area. And you also then take away from DeMarco if you play Lookman, because Lookman likes to play very wide when he gets on the ball, as Thuram not really as much. So I think it's worth that discussion of who's the number 10 then. If we think that the best formation is 2 strikers in Lautaro and Marcus Thuram, which I think we all agree on, right? And then you put a number 10 behind him, who for you guys is that number 10? Because there's a lot of guys here. And Zielinski, it looks like, might be out the door. He is a Serie A veteran, has been around, couldn't really get into the team last year, did have some injury issues. They tried him at the number 6, but he's traditionally more of like an 8 or a 10. We talked about Frattesi, Italian national, loves to get into the box to score goals. Not the most creative player in terms of technical ability, but kind of nose for goals kind of guy. And then you have Mkhitaryan, who's kind of like a mix of both and is more of like you would see him as like a guy that plays wing and can play as a 10. Very creative.
My first reaction is for Frattesi, but he's not very progressive. That's not what he's known for. Again, like you said, he likes to get in the box, and he is a good finisher for being just a midfielder. So part of my concern there is you're just gonna have another hole in the middle of the field. So then that really leaves Zielinski, and that leaves.
I forgot about Zielinski. That's a good shout too.
And that leaves Mkhitaryan. And I don't trust Mkhitaryan to put in too many minutes again, even with 3 competitions, even just you're letting him play 1 competition, being Supercopa for 4 games. So I think, to me, and it sounds crazy, but from a little bit of what we saw, those couple of minutes, that 1 game that Zielinski played as a 10 that came in, I think Zielinski could really be
He's not
very
gonna
big
start
value add. But it's gonna be it should be for Frattesi.
Such bad tunnel vision and just focus on things.
I got tunnel vision from that game because it was so pretty.
He played well, but like he's not gonna start there at all.
You're saying that he's their best number 10.
No, I think it's Frattesi. I'm just worried about his progression.
You think it's Frattesi?
Yeah.
I think Frattesi can do it because maybe Lautaro and Thuram can do the creativeness, and he can be the nose for goal with them as well, where he lacks in
kind of thing.
where he lacks in the creativeness. But I really think their best bet, even though I said I don't think it's going to work, and I think it might take away from Lautaro being closer to the pitch in his one-time finishes, which he's very good at. But is having him play as kind of like a false niner, and then having Thuram and Lookman play off him, and you have to just have Thuram get adjusted to like more so off of the right than the left, because Lookman's not going to give up that position. I think that's their best bet. Get the best players that you have on the pitch, and then Boney, I think, would be very good at the false 9, because like on Parma, they were hammering balls into his feet, and he would release Dennis Mann and on the counter attack, and then he can get in the box for the last cross. But I think that's their best bet. And then they have a lot of flexibility with what they have. If they want to play 2 guys behind him, one, they have a lot of flexibility to do that.
What if they
I think
don't? What if they don't get Lookman though? Because that's a real possibility.
Then they should actually go out and look for an actual number 10. I would hate for this to happen, but a good player that I think that they are linked with, that I think would be a very good fit, and I really don't want it to happen because I really like this player. I would be happy to watch him play in the league, but I'd be pissed to see him in an Inter. Color and jersey is Nkunku. He's a great number 10.
That's a really good shout. That makes a lot of sense.
Thuram and Lautaro and Nkunku can play all in different positions. He's a little selfish like Lookman, but he's known for assists. He can score. He doesn't always press that much, but I don't know how much they're going to be pressing Inter. So I think that would be a great fit for them, but I hope they don't do that.
I mean, that's a great shout. That's where he was playing his best ball when he was at Leipzig. So I can see that working out really well.
I mean, for me, Mats, I would agree with you that if they bring in Lookman, I would just figure out a way to get those 3 guys on the field. They're your 3 best forwards. You have like 3 of the best, I don't know, like top 6 forwards in the league, right?
Yeah.
Hard to say that none of those guys are in that conversation. For me, if they don't bring in Lookman, and you guys are going to hate this, I think it's Mkhitaryan without any question. 30 starts
You got to move
last
away
year.
from him.
He was always the furthest guy forward when he was playing as those 8s. He loves to play in that areas. I think for me, what I would be expecting from him is in training. Oh, Chivu wants to play with the number 10. This has my name written all over it. That's the best parts of my game are in the final third. I'm extremely creative. I'm 1v1 dribbler. I think you would get a ton out of him in there. He is older, so there could be a drop off, but I would think that makes the most sense. And you had one more point you wanted to make, though.
Me? I was just going to say we could use shout out Alex's article, right? Lautaro was actually one of the guys who was an inefficient finisher. However, I think that was just a down year from Lautaro because the season before was one of the most efficient finishers I've ever seen. But Lookman was a very efficient finisher, so having Lautaro play as a false 9 and create for Lookman to be one of those efficient finishers would be beneficial as well. But I did like your shout. Those are Mkhitaryan's best aspects of his game. But to me, you got to move on from the oldie. He's old. Move on.
Yeah, I mean, before I make my final point, I will say I'm being an absolute hypocrite because I can't wait to watch 39-year-old Luka Modric play for Milan, and Mkhitaryan's only 36. So,
I mean, those are 2 different class of players.
I know. I mean, obviously, but I'm just saying. I mean, the legs are probably in the same state. My only thing here is that out of all the position groups, I think that this front 3 is going to be the easiest one to just have itself figured out.
Yeah.
Like it'll just be a couple of different iterations for the first couple of games, and whatever works the best, they're just going to stick with. But it's not going to be any decision of Chivu. It's just going to be, let's just try this one game, try that one game, and whatever works the best is going to work the best because he's not going to be a tactician with that front 3. That front 3 is just going to work off of each other as much as they want, and that'll just figure itself out. So I think that's going to be the least of their worries.
I think that's fair. But that brings us to the squad, guys. And if you've been with us since day 1 last year, you know how we end these episodes. We define what it would be to be for a successful season for the club. And I think for Inter, there's got to be some pretty high standards. So what would you guys define as success for this team?
Even though I don't agree with the manager and I don't think it's possible for them, we went through the lines. They have some of the best players in the league: Lautaro, Thuram, Barella, Bastoni. They're in win now. They just made it to the Champions League final. They stumbled a lot, but they were a couple games away from a treble. I don't think that Chivo can come anywhere close to that, but the 2 trophies are bust for them. The Scudetto, the Coppa Italia, the Supercoppa, or the Champions League. They got to win 2, or in my opinion, not a good season. But I think if you win 1 and that 1 is a Serie A, you can spin it as, all right, we'll take it. But this is such a good team.
I would say.
I guess so. But I think they got to win 2. You got to win 2 trophies. When Juventus was in their reign, it was every year they were winning 2 trophies minimum. I think Inter's got to win 2 trophies. I don't think they do that. I don't think they come close to the Scudetto. I think it's a bad season for Inter, but that would be a successful season for me for them.
Quick question
I agree with Mats.
Quick question for you. Sorry, because I think on your point, Mats, this is important to talk about. You mentioned Juventus's reign. They were winning Scudettos. Can we say that Inter have had a reign? They've won.
I mean, this should be their reign, but you're
It
right. They
should
don't.
have. Yeah, but they already missed the
Correct.
boat on that, I think. So it's not even
Yes,
a
you're
reign
right.
at this point.
Yeah, but if you go, an Inter fan would tell you that they are the current best team in the Serie A, and they're the best team in the league doing things in Europe. So this is like their
Yeah,
cycle
guess
of
that's
reigning.
true.
But you're right. They've totally missed the boat in there. They have done an awful job in reigning the Serie A because they haven't.
There's not good Raiders.
All right, so for UMOTS, it's 2 trophies, but they'd be okay with winning just the Serie A.
Yeah, but
Alright.
if they win the Copa, I don't think that's a successful season.
Okay.
I mean, from a management point of view and an Inter fan point of view, no one's left.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same team.
I mean,
last year.
Inzaghi did leave.
Hold on. But Inzaghi's not passing the ball around, and he's not shooting. It's
That's
the
true.
same squad out on the pitch, and it's been the same squad for a very long time. If at a very minimum they know how to play together, they need to be able to figure it out on the pitch themselves. And so I think I totally agree with Mats. A successful season from that standpoint is 2 trophies. Mats, go ahead.
But Milan had 2 trophies and it wasn't successful. So it cannot be the Copa and the Super Copa as the 2.
Well, that was a great season for Milan. So we'll move on from there.
Milan got 1 trophy. They lost in
They
the
got 1
final.
trophy.
Oh,
Mats.
they lost. My
They lost
bad.
to Bologna. bro.
Correct. But if they did get 2, we were talking about if it was a successful or not successful.
No, and it was a dog shit season. So anyways, moving on from that blemish of my career. Yes, I agree that they need to make a run at 2 trophies and finish it off, not runner-ups, not semifinals. They need to get hardware in the building in at least 2 competitions, primarily Scudetto. I mean, at the end of the day, every one of these Serie A teams needs to be thinking that the Scudetto is the number 1 trophy and that is final. There's nothing else to be said about that. But having the experience that this Inter team has, they need to be going deep again in the Champions League. They already did it. Whether they were lucky or not, and whether they should have deserved to have been in the final, they need to go deep in the Champions League. I don't think that they make it to the semifinals. I think the quarterfinals finish is probably the right target there. But also then a Coppa Italia, they should be certainly in the semifinals, getting to the final and fighting for it. So from an Inter and managerial or management point of view, 2 trophies is the target. From my perspective, it's they're going to struggle. They're going to struggle all season long. And I don't think that this is going to turn into a season that they're going to be able to they've been able to show the last couple of seasons. Here we go, Vos. I disagree.
I do disagree a little bit. I think that after what happened last season, and not even just last season, we had 3 years of Inzaghi. We had 1 Scudetto, 2 Champions League finals. Losing Inzaghi, you definitely downgraded a manager. Your squad hasn't really changed. You got a little bit older, and then you added some depth kind of players, more or less. For me, they're looking at this as top 4 is success. They're not the best team in the league anymore. I think most people would agree with that. So how can your number 1... you can't keep the goal the same thing as it was. You're just not the same team.
No, but you can't be the super club that Inter is and have top 4 as your only
They've
goal.
won.
Yes.
They've won this.
What do you
Is
mean?
Napoli a super club?
At
won
this
the
point,
same
yes,
number
in
of
Serie A,
Scudettos over the last,
in Serie A,
Yeah, but-
they're a super club right now.
You're right
Yes,
now.
Napoli is
Inter-
a super club. Yes, and Inter is a super club in Serie A right now.
There's
You
also-
cannot be saying that they're just going to go for top 4.
You
I know,
can't.
but
you also
you have to reset your expectation because you also have a different manager. So
different manager, yes, but you still have by a pretty healthy margin the most wage bill across the league. So you can't be paying all these players the most amount of money and then say, "Oh, but we're going for top 4." Whether you have a good manager or a new manager or not, you're paying the most for your players. You need to win as much as you can. You can't just be
I agree with that. I think they would like to win the league, but I think success for this team right now is finishing top 4. I don't think it's winning.
That's
the league.
soft. That is such soft
not-
thinking. And if an Inter fan says that, I'm not letting it. That's not happening because you can't say, "Oh, top 4 is a successful season for us. We just made the Champions League final. You fumbled. You could have won the treble last season. You were 4 games away from the treble. Now we go to top 4 because we lose a manager? No. You have some of the best players in the world, the best positions. You have the most expensive wage bill. You need to go win the Scudetto. Whether you made it, they decided to appoint that loser manager.
All right, so my opinion on this, I'm not even going to say. It's not helpful. But what I will say is, to wrap this spot up, I do want to say one thing that I actually don't think we talked about, which is really worrying going into the season. And we are going to do a prediction of the full table in a couple of weeks. So I don't want to get into that too much. Last year, you mentioned this very early on in this episode, Mons. Ton of mental lapses for this team across at the beginning of the season, in the middle of the season, at the end of the season. I expect that to continue and to get worse. I don't expect in any way that's going to get better. They've come so far, but then they've fallen so far every time. And I think that weighs on the club, and I think it weighs on the players. And I feel this team is good, yes, but I think the vibes around the club are very bad, which is what's putting this in my head of top 4 is successful. Because realistically, they should be the second best team in the league, if not the best, off of pure roster spots. But the vibe around it just doesn't tell me that.
Can I answer this first, actually? I had this thought being an episode, and it was a fleeting thought, but it just came back to me, and this is my hot take on Inter this season, and I would hate for this to be the case, but I think it might be. This Inter team might have a chip on their shoulder. They might be coming into the season. I don't think this is the case, but don't count it out. This team might have a chip on their shoulder where they're like, we got to so many finals, we just couldn't finish it. You mental midgets, can we just figure it out? Can we just get there? And they're in that locker room screaming at each other, saying, let's figure this shit out this season. And part of me thinks that they've got that going on in the locker room.
Yeah, but
I'm not saying it's true, but don't be surprised if that's the case. They come out firing on all cylinders this season because everyone counted them out without Inzaghi, and they came so close last year, and they just need to get across the finish line, and now they want to get.
Yeah, but I would
such a hot take, Logs.
So hot.
A very good team with the very good players comes out very.
But what I will say is, Logs, where I'm going to push back on you is the best possible example of where we saw that actual thing happen. Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool. They were second, and they got it done eventually. But do you have that belief in this club? Like at Liverpool, it was Klopp, and there was they're gonna get there, they're gonna get there, they're gonna get there. I don't feel that way about Inter at all. No, I don't think the mental fortitude that Klopp instilled at Liverpool, it was so ingrained in those players and in the club. And at Inter, it's not there because there's those mental lapses, and the manager's gone. It isn't there, and that's what's worrying to me.
No, I agree with that, but I'm also biased, so I'm not gonna. It's hard for me to comment on my own take there. I'm biased.
Mats, you want to wrap us up here? We've been going a while.
I think Inter are going to struggle. They're going to struggle.
Plain simple.
Right. We'll see where we think they're actually going to finish when we do our table preview and prediction, which we're going to track better this year. But this was our first season preview episode, guys. If you have any thoughts, anything that we missed covering, shoot us a note, comment on YouTube, give us a like, give us a subscribe on whatever you're listening on. That really helps us. We're really looking forward to this season. We're getting back in our groove here. This is what we do best. I know you guys want the content. We want to hop on here to give you that content. And we're really looking forward to the season at the end of the day.
100%. So like you said, comment, like, subscribe, follow all the socials. You know where to find us at Calcio Culture FC, CalcioCulturefC. Don't get it wrong. Instagram, YouTube, especially X, TikTok, and you know where to listen with all of your favorite podcast streaming sites, Apple Pods and Spotify. Mats, take us away.
1 second. Never do that spelling thing again. And now Vana sign us off.
Paisanos, do not be a gagoots, and Forza Calcio Culture.